Hi there, Satin class. This afternoon you're going to listen to the second part of Hiawatha and the Peacemaker. So if you remember, the chiefs of the 4 nations, the 4 tribes, are paddling off together, and they're off to confront Chief Tadadohu, who, by all accounts, is a very evil, frightening and violent character. So as the page turns, there he is. Look at that. Frightening. Here we go. The wicked Tadadohu lived separately from his people. Bands of warriors stood guard day and night. When we arrived, they yelled and pushed us away. The Peacemaker kept his hands on by his side to discourage violence, but the chiefs and I pushed back. A figure appeared in the doorway of the dwelling, hunched over, withered and twisted. Tadadohu was a horrifying sight. Sickness from the evil within had taken over his body. Scales covered much of his skin, and snakes slithered through his hair and onto his shoulders. No words came from his mouth. Instead, a forked tongue produced a thick, hissing sound. My anger returned, and I wanted to destroy Tadadohu. The chiefs continued to push against the warriors. The fighting grew until something unexpected happened. A soft, haunting melody of purity and truth came floating through the air. Spellbound, all lowered their weapons. The hymn was coming from the lips of the Peacemaker. His melody had stopped the fighting, and the song drifted through the air. The moon crossed in front of the sun, darkening the blue sky. This miracle stunned the warriors, and they pulled back in fear. But the rest of us were enchanted by the glory of the hymn, and we joined in singing. Tadadohu cursed the sky, waving his sceptre and showing no sign of fear. As the Peacemaker finished his singing, the moon passed, revealing the sun again, more beautiful than before. The Peacemaker asked me to take medicine for Tadadohu's sickness. He said that where there is darkness, we must bring light, and that it is by forgiving that we are set free. I gathered roots and herbs for the medicine, but how could I help a man who had brought me such misery? How could I forgive him? Yet I put my heart and soul into the potion, and with this action my anger disappeared. I entered the hut with the medicine paste and fresh water. I explained that every day some of the paste must be mixed with the water and drunk. Tadadohu grabbed the medicine from my hands and drank. His strained breathing eased. The evil look in his eyes softened. He appeared to wonder why a man to whom he'd brought so much pain would help to heal him. The Peacemaker told Tadadohu that we would return in 3 days, and to continue taking the medicine. We travelled back to the people of the Cayuga, Mohawk, Seneca and Oneida, and told them of our encounter. On the 3rd day, a mass of people followed us to the land of the Onondaga to see Chief Tadadohu once again. Tadadohu's voice had returned, but he was still hunched over and sickly. The Peacemaker approached him, and with all the tribes watching, placed his hands above his head and chanted. Tadadohu let out a scream, and the snakes slithered from his hair into the grass where they belonged. Everyone followed the Peacemaker to a tall white pine he had placed. Everyone followed the Peacemaker to a tall white pine. He placed his hand on my back, and once again I spoke for him. People of all nations must now come together as one. Beneath this tree we shall bury our weapons of war. This will symbolize the end of our fighting. The men uprooted the white pine and threw their weapons into the hole. Now we will replant this tree, and it shall be called the Tree of Peace. As I looked at Tadadohu, the scales on his skin began to disappear. The Peacemaker placed his fist over his heart, and again I spoke. As 5 nations we will bring forth peace, power, and righteousness. The women of our tribes shall appoint the chiefs, and as one people we shall live under the protection of the great law. All voices will be heard, as we now vote before action is taken. I looked at Tadadohu, and the once crooked man now stood upright. Atop this great white pine shall live an eagle that will look over all 5 nations, and that eagle shall be you, Tadadohu. You will be the great keeper of peace and the protector of all the people. The men and women of the Mohawk nation began to stomp their feet in unison. Clapping came from the Cayuga, a chant formed between the Onondaga and the Oneida, and the Seneca pounded drums. The rhythm grew louder, in perfect time, and the melody soared through the pines. I looked over to Tadadohu, but he was gone. A beautiful scream echoed through the woodlands. And as 5 nations, we looked up to see an eagle perched atop the tree of peace. So at the back of this book we have some interesting information we have some interesting information. We've got the historical note and acknowledgements that the author wants to give. So it would be worth having a little listen to the history behind the book. So Hiawatha and the Peacemaker are thought to have lived in the 14th century, before Europeans travelled to North America. The Peacemaker, whose birth name was Deganoida, was a spiritual leader who was known for his sacred powers. Historians believe he had a speech impediment and that he chose Hiawatha to accompany him because Hiawatha was a gifted speaker. The 2 men journeyed across what is now Upper New York State and Ontario and Quebec, Canada, to unite the 5 nations of the Iroquois people who had been at war: the Cayugas, the Senecas, the Oneidas, the Mohawks, and the Onondagas. Much later, in 1722, the Tuscarora nation joined this united league, and it became the 6 Nations Iroquois Confederacy. So a confederacy is a league of countries or nations that are joined together because they have united ideas. Officially, it was known as the Haudenosaunee, or People of the Longhouse. This means that all Iroquois were one family and could live in peace under one roof. The Peacemaker's message of the Great Law of Peace pledged peace among nations by giving each tribe a special role in how the Iroquois governed themselves, how they ruled themselves. Each village and clan would choose a chief to represent it at the Council of Tribes. All decisions were made by a consensus at the council, so everybody had to agree, meaning that all voices had equal importance. Men and women shared power. It is said that the Great Law of Peace is the oldest participatory democracy on earth, and it had much influence on Benjamin Franklin, John Hancock, Thomas Jefferson, and the co-authors of the Constitution of the United States, who all supported self-government and a peaceful union. To this day, the 6 nations live in unity, harmony, and peace, based on the teachings of the Great Law from the Peacemaker and his disciple, Hiawatha. So it's believed that early presidents of the United States worked with the Iroquois law that they had voted upon, and their democracy, the way they live. It's believed that early presidents used that system to build the new system of the United States. It's a very interesting background story to how America is governed today. As I say, there are acknowledgements from the author there. I'm not going to read those. We're going to get on with our topic.